tasteMAKERS was funded in part by
It all comes down to creating something unique. It's important to take pride in one's work and share expertise. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
In this episode of tasteMAKERS, we head to Minnesota to meet makers, farmers, and a very talented chef who are unified by food building in Minneapolis. It's a space that was created to connect the dots between makers and consumers.
I'm Kat Neville, and for the past 2 decades, I've been telling the story of local food. In that time, American food culture has exploded in tiny towns and big cities from coast to coast. In tasteMAKERS, I explore the maker movement and take you along for the journey to meet the makers who define the flavor of American cuisine. Here in Minneapolis, there is a place that represents what can happen when values-driven makers are brought together under one roof, sourcing their ingredients from small local farms with everything brought to life in a restaurant kitchen that shares the same space.
I started food building, one, because I love people. I love engaging with people that are passionate and fired up and very skillful in a particular discipline. I'm also a very strong supporter and believer in the underdog. It's the Irish in me coming out. And I am a great believer in the idea of finding ways that you can work with small farms to add value to their products out in the market, and hope that we can spread the opportunities for the small farms and also for the artisan makers, where you have these artisan producers all in the one building where people can come in, tour the place, experience the products. You meet the people who create all of these products, and that's the win.
So we're inside of Alemar Cheese Company's production facility, which is inside of food building, and they're actually making cheese curds over here right now. I mean, that is the most Midwestern of all cheeses, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're known for soft French cheese, but we are in Minnesota, and Minnesotans love cheese curds, and the kitchen wants them, so we make them, and they're awesome.
So what is a cheese curd exactly?
Cheese curds are the component and building block of all cheeses. This is sort of like making cheddar cheese and stopping kind of in the middle.
Mm-hmm. It's delicious.
It
is.
is.
It's like salty, but it has that squeakiness that everybody is looking for
exactly
in the
right.
perfect cheese curd.
Yep, and,
Awesome.
and that beautiful milk that we use really shines. If you're buying conventional commodity milk, it's all going into one big vat. For us, we want to find the best dairy and single or dual source the milk so that we know exactly what the animals are eating, how they're treated, how they're housed, and that really matters, and it really reflects on the milk. These are the sort of the flagship cheese that we make. These are the larger format bries we do. In the back is Good Thunder. That's a beer wash soft little square. And then this is our most recent release. These are the larger sort of semi-soft cheeses, which is a tome style.
So you make like 5 different cheeses.
That's exactly right.
It's all about the raw ingredients that are coming in. I mean, you have to have the skill and the craft to be able to turn it into something beautiful, but if you're using an inferior raw product, you'll never end up with something that's exceptional.
You'll never get there. And if you start with the best, you have the best chance of turning out something special. No guarantee, but over time, we've been really lucky to find that spot. We have always made a point of paying a premium for the milk that we buy. We want the relationship with our dairy farmer to be special and for them to be able to make a sustainable living. And in many cases, with the fluctuation of milk prices, dairy farmers are really suffering, and we can't do this without them. We just can't. And so their success is a huge determining factor in our success.
Here in the U.S., the majority of our milk is sold on the commodity market at extremely low prices, which is financially unsustainable for small farmers. That's why it's so important for makers like Alemar Cheese to have direct relationships with farmers like Kristen here at Core Star Farms. You are a first-generation dairy farm. You grew up on farms, but you built this with your husband.
Yes, 4 years ago we built this farm for different circumstances. We didn't end up, taking over either of our parents' farms, so we decided to go out and build our own, and that way we could build exactly what we wanted. We were only able to afford 30 acres, so most of that is pasture. The land we were able to afford is land that no other farmer really wanted because it's kind of a lowland. So it's the most sustainable way to both utilize that land. Land nobody wanted is now making milk. Every morning, every night, we milk the cows. We both do have jobs, so we milk them before work and then we milk them after work.
When you're milking your cows and then you're selling your milk into that commodity market, you don't know what you're going to get, kind of like on a stock market in a way.
Dairy is kind of a crazy industry in the way that we make a product. We let it leave our farm before we even know what we're going to get paid for it. We don't know what we're going to get paid for until a month later when we get our check. And it's all up to the markets, so we really have no control over that. It can be really depressing just to watch the numbers go red, and day after day for months they were red for the last couple of years. So you're making less and less money. At the same time, the cost of production stays the same or goes up. So the stress on these farmers that are maybe third or fourth generation farm, and they feel like the weight of their dad and their grandfathers all on their shoulders because they're going to be the ones to lose the farm.
It's heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. And we're losing more than just people running businesses. You're losing culture. You're losing that thread through families, and communities are falling apart because of it.
Well, the community impact itself is huge. Our skid loader tires come from right down the road. We buy fuel locally. We purchase all of our hay. Somebody local grows it, and if we're not here, we're not giving them any business.
There's a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But by having a direct relationship with someone like Alemar, then do you have at least some measure of control?
Well, at least you know exactly where it's going, and you can talk to that person and maybe develop a business relationship and help each other out.
Absolutely, because they rely on you. They don't get to make the cheese that they want to make without the type of milk that you're producing.
Right.
You've heard it before, buy local, and here's why. When you buy a locally produced product made with locally procured ingredients, those dollars stay in your community. The tax base is supported, jobs are created, and you also have a lower carbon footprint than products that are made elsewhere and shipped in.
I saw a chance to kind of help us bring some regional identity to Minnesota. We've got some of the best pigs in the world by far, easily. And can we make a product that's on a world-class level and say, this is from Minnesota, this is a big part of us? For consumers to get educated, the food building works in some great ways. Obviously, you can see all the product here. You can see it getting made, you can see the products that make the products, and you can see the people that make the products, and then you can see the finished product and taste the finished product. There's still a huge amount of education to do with folks on how we try really hard to make sure that they get the best product possible in the confines of the distribution system that we work with. The shift from small diversified farms to a large corporate farm shows up in the weirdest of ways. We had a little cafe in my town, Royal, Iowa. Why couldn't you walk into that cafe and get hamburger from George out on the back 40 and pork chops from Fred? Why wouldn't it all be about local food? Instead, we asked for cheaper food which is what the corporate folks responded to. And we got this great homogenization of all of our food culture. So every little cafe in every little town in the US is the same food. It all comes off the back of the same truck, unfortunately. That money that we spend a lot of money in the local economy, goes to local people. We hope that folks eventually understand that if they're spending money with us, it stays here.
We're basically doing what people were doing 100 years ago. The equipment might be a little fancier because it's required by USDA laws and health departments. Yeah, that's all good. But it really is almost the same practices.
Our next stop is at Weicker Acres, where the Weik family is dedicated to raising their heritage breed hogs in an environmentally sensitive and humane way. They're one of less than 10% of all the hog operations in the U.S. that take their hogs from farrow to finish.
We're not a confinement farm, as you can see. Our pigs are pastured in the warm months, but obviously in the non-warm months we have lots of snow. So we have to kind of come up with a system where they can still have access to air and sun, which is really important, and access to being able to see other pigs, because pigs are actually a very social animal. I think the advantage is quite simply just a healthier pig, and it just makes for a happy pig.
Well, and when you're walking through this barn, each pig has its own personality.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they aren't just kind of these cookie cutter animals.
You know, and that comes with some hard parts of farming pigs. Because they are an extremely social, intelligent animal, harvesting is never easy for us. We're very picky about the whole process. We're picky about the transportation. We're picky about it being a very stressless process as possible, if that makes sense.
Truly, when you choose food that's grown in the right way, and when you pay for that food, you're voting with your dollar.
You are.
So when someone buys something from a place like Red Table or eats at one of the restaurants that you supply to, they're in turn supporting you and the way that you're raising your animals.
People should eat less meat, but when they do eat meat, it should be high quality, responsibly raised meat.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good, important change that we all can do to help with the environment, to help with local farmers, to really vote with your fork.
So now we're inside of Bakersfield Flour and Bread with Steve, and he's going to take me on a tour.
Yes. Flour is thought of, I think, from a commodity standpoint, more of a functionality. Like, how do I use this to make something else? And that's understandable. But part of our approach with fresh flour and nutrition and flavor is to think about that as a key ingredient, because it is a key ingredient in cookies or breads or pasta. And so how do you bring that forward? And that's a lot to do with interaction, demos, customer education.
How different, really, does one grain taste from another? Can you really taste it in the bread?
You can. The words we use a lot are nutty, earthy. You know, I would say there's a sweetness to fresh flour in general that's not sugary sweet, but almost like a piece of fruit would have. So those elements are really there in each grain, and they're more predominant or prevalent depending on the grain itself. Overall, it comes through in such a deep, kind of complex way always, you know, depending on what the bread is. One of the pillars that we kind of stand on is fresh flour. So what we do is we mill, and then within 24 to 48 hours, we're using that flour. And the reason we do that is we want fresh flour to be highlighted in our products. What happens over time is oxidation occurs. So industrial flour that's set on the shelf for a month or 2 months has been oxidized to the point where much of the fat has been eliminated. And so all of those elements that are gone on the shelf, that's a flour that say is 6 weeks old, are still present in the flour that we're milling.
What people don't realize is that this country was covered with local mills.
Right.
150 years ago.
Exactly.
And it was only in the industrialization of the grain economy where it became very, very centralized.
Yes.
And now that's starting to come back, and it's creating opportunity for farmers to be able to grow the types of grains that they want, to run their farms the way that they want to farm. And it also creates opportunity for people like you who want to create a product that is unique and something that's an expression of yourself.
Right. For us, it makes sense and it's natural to do what we're doing, and we can't imagine doing it any other way. I mean, that kind of idea of going backwards, in a sense, is what we're kind of all about. Going backwards and forwards at the same time.
Everything starts on a farm and comes all the way through the process to the consumer. And here at Food Building, it puts all the makers kind of front and center. And because all of you are so concerned about direct sourcing from farmers you have relationships with, and then you have the restaurant that kind of pulls it all together, it's like this little microcosm of the local food movement in a way.
It is, and it's, you know, when people say like farm to table, well, every food is farm to table. It's just a matter of how you think about it, right? And so we're trying to take that to the next step, which is it's more than that. It's a direct connection. And so, you know, what does that mean? And how do you think about your food in terms of freshness, in terms of quality? You know, so I mean, we're trying to make sure that all of those aspects are highlighted.
So our next stop is here in western Minnesota. We're going to meet up with Luke Peterson, who partners with Steve at Bakersfield. This field actually grew a number of the seeds and grains in his seeded bread.
We live in an economy where it's return on investment. If I put so much money in, how can I get as much out as fast as possible?
Yeah.
And that isn't the way that the soil works, or the farm works, or our environment works. The farms that I'm farming, they built themselves with no help of a farmer. Like the soil organic matter was much higher and the ground is more fertile when nobody farmed it. The soil itself is actually a living organism and it needs to eat. So the only way that it can eat is if you have a living plant on the soil, feeding those soil microbes through their roots. And the plants need the sun's energy to be able to do that.
Well, and that's the idea of when you regenerate, we need to come to a system that allows us to sustain. And it sustains us, it sustains the life on the earth, and it's something where we are way out of balance.
Honestly, we might need to first become sustainable before we can say that we're regenerative. You can take the farming textbook that tells you do this and then this and this and this and throw it out the window. And you need to go out to your field and stand there and listen to it and look at what's happening and then make a decision that day. I have a lot of regenerative practices, such as a very diverse rotation, perennials in the system, pollinator strips around each field, don't use any chemicals or synthetics, introducing livestock. Another big part, if we were going to put a piece into the regenerative puzzle, would be people. We need to talk about people in that term first. If you look at the food building, what's the first thing that you notice when you walk in? It's people, a lot of people, and they're all busy, and they're all very passionate. So, I don't know, just people are the main thing, the first thing to talk about if we're going to talk about regenerative agriculture.
We're wrapping the episode here at Kieran's Kitchen Northeast with Chef Ian Gray, who has the opportunity to source many of his ingredients right down the hall.
Having the opportunity to work with people like Mike, Steve, Keith, just utilizing their products that they've mastered over 10, 20 years and tapping into not only their talent, but their knowledge with their product, using those things that are very unique in they're almost living, as opposed to these things that you can just get that have, you know, preservatives and packet full of this and that, and just it's a great opportunity to learn more, grow, orientate it with the community however we can. We're trying to price accordingly where people feel comfortable, and then they see it. If they get an opportunity to see the makers and take that tour and like just see the products being made firsthand, we hope that like that click happens, and the service component that can really just give the information to get people excited, we can show people, and you know, even if 10% are then sparked, hopefully they come back or they talk about this old world stuff being made like in a new way. I think food system is just like an extension of food traditions and like just history. I think there's a lot of that is just completely disconnected from the current eating models of just commodity, convenience, and all that. It's definitely difficult, but if we can just kind of break through, have the patience, and just really try and drive towards it with the help of the makers, who are very passionate about not just their products and how they're used, but how it's creating this community where the core is just trying to create this informational culture that will then break through that food system barrier that's there.
The money that people earn, the places that they put their money, the things that people value at this point are not about food, unfortunately. That's what food building's trying to do, is make them understand that the value can be about food. And that's what our hope is that they buy into that value.
It is the diversity of ideas, the diversity of practices. It is the pride in those things, the support for those things, those activities. And as a result of that, you have one, a much more interesting community, I believe. And number two, you also have an example and an encouragement for a lot of other activities. And then that encouragement leads to further innovation and new ideas. And out of that, I mean, that's how countries are built. That's how the US was built, you know. Immigrants coming here and finding their passions, getting the opportunity.
We want more people to do this. We want young people to get excited about farming. And farming isn't very exciting right now. It's hard, a lot of financial issues, but we need to make it exciting so that we can have future generations who want to farm.
I think people need to realize that it's in the farmer's best interest to take the best care of their cows that they possibly can, because a happy cow is going to make us milk, which is then going to make us money. And for most farmers, it's more than just the money. That's not why they do this. It's just a love of cows, love of the land, just love of being outside.
With the relationships that we have and that we're building all the time, we're able to really look at how are we sourcing and what does it mean for that farmer and for us. So it shortens the chain and makes it much more of a direct process in terms of that type of interaction.
Without Steve Horton and Bakersfield, I wouldn't have 2 or 3 crops in my rotation probably. So what Steve is doing is very unique. To be able to work with somebody that is willing to work with you year in and year out is important, and to be able to depend on somebody is very unique right now.
We're sourcing the best milk, we're paying more for that milk. We're taking our time in the make room. You can taste the difference. You can see the time and energy and the ingredients that we used end up being something pretty remarkable.
It gives us so much pride in our product and makes us do better when we can see the end product. We do a better job on our end because you can see the end product. And then beyond that, you can see the consumers.
In the connection between farmer and maker and consumer is where we often fall short, unfortunately. And the romanticism about it, I like to say that people want to know that it's there, but they don't necessarily want to spend the money to make sure that it stays there.
Hopefully, when you look at the type of creation of what we've done here and the people that it's about, because it's always about the people. And I mean that not just in the work that they do, but it is about the thinking that they put into it, about the honing of the craft. It is about the extraordinary barriers that there are to making a success of it. And still, even with all of that, to never, ever, ever cut corners in making the product that they make.
From the meat to the bread to the cheese, all of the farmers, makers, and the chef who you met in this episode are tied together in this one deceptively simple sandwich. To learn more about the people who you met in this half hour, just head to wearetastemakers.com. Thank you for joining me here in Minneapolis, and I'll see you next time. Connect with us online at wearetastemakers.com or through social media on these handles.
Tastemakers was funded in part by
It all comes down to creating something unique. It's important to take pride in one's work and share expertise. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.